All right, all you beautiful people out there in YouTube land, we have a Classic Plus KitchenAid mixer that it is actually starting to leak grease and oil out the top. So we're going to clean it up, replace the grease, and go from there. We are now replacing the gasket. Basically, from what I gather, is the grease that they use in here. If you use it too much so it starts to heat up, the grease starts to separate and oil is what leaks out at the bottom of that. Or if you don't use it enough and you just let the grease sit there and say you only use it once a year, it can actually cause the grease to break down and separate out. So anybody that's watching this, if you've been a mechanic, handyman, or a woman who have opened up a container of grease that you used to like pack bearings with, and you get like that watery substance on top of it, that is basically what is happening here. That is obviously a different type of grease than this, so it's just so that you can kind of know what's going on. We're replacing it with food grade grease, which is bought off of Amazon. I'm going to need a hammer, scraper, some screwdrivers. You can use gloves if you want, it's up to you. I got some towels, I got a box to put the grease in as well. So we're going to get started. First, we are going to take off this back plate set screw, and this is just a Phillips. Back plate comes right off. We are going to then, I don't know if you can see this, but right underneath there's the tie that holds everything in place. Sorry about the lighting. So there's this tie that slides right out in the back. This is your anti-pull, or basically so you don't pull the cable out of the machine. So I'm basically going to flip it back around. I kind of briefly looked at this beforehand. Just trying to take a look at, see what I needed on there. You have screws on the back, in the center, and then you have this silver ring, which is where you're going to see the grease coming out. That is called your Beautification Ring, I believe is what it's called. And what we're going to do there is we're going to get a screwdriver in between and try and get that to pop off. It should come off once it's going. I just wanted to get a smaller screwdriver. I mean, it's real easy to damage the paint. I'm sure they probably make a plastic tool to knock these off. And you can see all the grease. You can see all the grease that's coming up. Now you can see there's like 5 other screws I think around there. But what we're going to do is we are now going to actually use a punch set and knock out this pin right here on the side. You can slowly rotate this through. this way. Try a smaller punch. I have a mixture of brass punches and steel punches. I usually try to go with a brass punch first. This way I don't damage the item. And in this case, we're also going to go get a steel hammer. Alright, I'm going to be right back. I'm having a hard time getting this. I want to see if I can get it another way. Alright, so we finally got her moving. Took a couple hard whacks. There we go. I mean, I really had a beat on that pin. That was a lot more than I thought I was going to have to. But, all right. So then what we are going to do, move that to the side, move that to the side. We're going to take a screwdriver, and we are now going to just gently pry this apart. And then we should be able to pull it off the rest of the way. You can see all that lovely grease that decided to break down. We're going to put that to the side for right now. Then we're going to pull off these two bottom screws. We're going to pull off these screws right up here. And there are 5 screws on the top ring. Now we're going to go to the screws that are all the way in the back. Alright, well, just to note, one of those screws actually have a little crush lock washer on the back. One of the back ones had it. So when we take everything apart, we're going to look to see if there's any other lock washers. I don't know if that's standard for one side, but on this, as you're looking at it, it's the left rear. So what we're going to do is take a screwdriver, and right where the shift for speed is, we're going to kind of pry up a little bit on that. So I'm going to take this cover out first. I'm going to put another screwdriver over on the other side. We're going to kind of pry up a little bit just to get this separated. There we go. All right. So as you can see, we now have the upper and lower half separated. You can see the lovely grease in there. Some gears that slid out. That gear that's down there goes in there. We'll get that taken care of shortly. All right. So I'm actually kind of surprised. I mean, my wife hasn't used this mixer very much, and I'm assuming it's just the separation on there that it's been sitting, but you can almost see where it's like brand new. It's actually like hard, kind of like brand new from the factory. It's quite interesting. All right, well, let's get this cleaned up. So I just had like this old little cardboard box, and we're just gonna scrape off this old grease. And we don't have to be 100% perfect. I mean, the more we get off, the better it's going to be, because it's just going to keep breaking down more and more. I'm going to turn this around. You can see like how it's hard. I'm quite sure at this point ours has broken down due to lack of use. we're just trying to get out, again, as much as possible. And you can see this gasket that's down here that I kind of mentioned earlier. And I do want to make it known that I am not a small appliance or anything certified type person. So this is what I've done. This is what I'm deciding to do. I'm not telling anybody that this is the right way. I'm sure it's probably not the right way. But this is how I am doing it. I am just going to throw on a glove real quick just so I can retrieve this one gear. Which, this gear is the gear that goes towards the front, and that cap that I took off, I probably shouldn't have taken off the cap. It probably would have stayed in place. So I got most of that cleaned out. I'm going to take a paper towel and try and get more of it out. If you're kind of worried about cleanup and not wanting to get grease everywhere, because as everybody knows, grease is a pain to clean up, you could probably, instead of using like a scraper, get away with using a plastic spoon or a plastic knife that you would use for like a party or whatever, and then you can just throw it away when you're done. So I'm pretty happy with getting that inside cleaned out for the upper half. I mean, there's a little bit, but I don't have any food grade safe degreaser to really use and the time to do all that. So what I am going to do though is pull off this gasket, set that to the side for a minute, and try to wipe off more of this grease. I mean, I'm sure you could spend a lot of time getting this perfect and back to what it would have been when they assembled this originally. But I'm not going to spend that much time on that. So you might have saw I just pulled off a washer that came off of the bottom of the shaft. And there's grease that's on mine coming all the way back here. So I'm just trying to clean all that up. up here. This is probably going to be hard to see underneath here, but there is some grease inside here, so we are going to try and clean that out as well. So from everything that I've read, there's not supposed to be a lot of grease underneath here. It's pretty much just enough on the gear just to keep it lubricated, but I'm pretty sure this is all come through the top and leak down. Because this is definitely what would be coming through that beauty ring. I kind of like that I did that. You can see actually how much grease turned to oil. So, or liquid grease, I don't know exactly what the technical term is, but that definitely is not good. So, I don't know if you can see these little pockets right here. Those are all filled with grease, greasy oil. I'm going to take a small little screwdriver, pack it in there, soak up that grease or greasy oil, whatever it's called. And this is that gasket. Kind of just going to clean it off. Want to be very careful not to rip the gasket. Goes without saying, if the gasket's ripped, you need to replace it. This gasket's in pretty good condition. I'm not leaking oil or grease from this. It goes down the shaft and then comes out the beauty ring. So we are then going to put this back on. Again, that's where all that grease is coming from. So that's the shaft, goes through. I know someone, once they do this, they'll probably be able to tell me, but there's a distinct smell that this grease has, and there's something else that it's reminding me of, and I just cannot put my finger on it what it is, but it smells very familiar, and I've never done anything like this before. So alright, so what we are going to do is open up our new tub of grease. You definitely see there's a difference. I mean, This is basically white compared to the brown. And we are just going to put a couple dabs of grease into this gear. Like I said, there's not supposed to be really much in here, so we're just putting a little bit on. All right. And now what we're going to do is we are going to scrape out the grease, and we're just going to pack it back in on all the gears here. So let's get to it. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think of something to use to pack it in with. Be right back. Alright, so what we're going to use is a plastic fork, because I cannot find any plastic spoons. And I was thinking about it when I said pack it in, it's not like you're cramming it in, you're just kind of want to force it into the gears, but not too bad. It's not like you're packing a bearing. If anybody is mechanics, they know about packing bearings, so it's not like you're having to do that. And we definitely want to try and get back in as about the same amount of grease that we had in the first place. Pretty much from everything that I've seen, this is a little 4-ounce container. I believe on this classic is basically the amount that it takes is just the 4 ounces. So again, we just want to make sure we're pretty well packed in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the gear, I'm going to try and work it around real quick. Try and get all that in there. It is kind of stiff, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my punch, put my punch in the hole that we knocked the pin out of. This way we can just rotate it a couple times, make sure everything's getting coated. So you don't want to lose that lump of grease. Kind of reminds me of like marshmallow fluff. Uh-oh. We're making a mess. It's all right, we can clean all that up in a minute. Alright, so that's basically it. I'm just going to throw this away so it's out of our way. All right. So our next step is to put this gear back into there. I am just gonna put some grease on there. Slides right in. Have a little dab of grease, put in that gear in there, that gear in there, just to make sure we get grease there. I know someone's gonna yell at me that I didn't clean this up enough, but sorry, I don't care. All right. So we're now going to flip this back over and drop this on. Now, the other thing is we don't want to force this. And actually mine just dropped right on. I had the gears set perfectly, but that's nice to have this in there so you can wiggle it back and forth and make sure the gears sit down right. Okay. Thought I lost that washer. Alright, what I'm going to do now is lean this back up. I'm going to put these front screws in first. Not going to tighten them down all the way. Just don't want anything moving around on me. And don't forget, there was that one with the lock washer in the back for the screw. Nothing else has a lock washer. And again, as you're facing it, mine came off of the left side, the side closest to the K for KitchenAid. Now we're going to put these screws back in. It's always best to finger tighten screws first. This way you don't cross thread them. I don't know if there was a special torque setting to it. It didn't feel like it was very tight past hand tight. All right. Just give it a good wipe down. And then, again, this is that ring that came off of this shaft. It's kind of like a plastic. It almost feels like it should be almost like a gasket. So, all right, so on this, not only do we have to line up the teeth, but we also have to line up the hole with the shaft as well. So it might be a little bit of a pain, but we'll get it. Just gonna wiggle it back and forth. Give it a little push as we're going. trying to do is get these teeth lining up properly. I'm not. Okay, there we go. And you can kind of see, maybe possibly, that the holes aren't quite lining up. So it is pretty close. What I have here is a punch that is smaller than everything, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and wiggle it in there so I can line up everything. It's not the easiest trying to make sure you guys can see at the same time, but we'll get it done. I mean, if you don't have a punch like this, you can use a small screwdriver, but we definitely want to make sure it's lined up before we try driving that pin through. Alright, so we finally got it lined up. Should be able to see. See right there. There we go. There's a good picture. So the pin holes lined up. You can see I did mark up that a little bit. But then we're going to take our pin and we're going to push our pin right back on through. And we'll be set. So the one thing is, sometimes this can be quite frustrating. Some things don't want to line up. So you got to remember, take your time, have patience. Worst case scenario, walk away and come back in 5-10 minutes. So the goal is to pretty much have this pin basically flush with the surface. It's not going to be, it wasn't originally, so I'm not too worried about it, but you don't want 1/4 inch sticking out one side and then it barely going through the other side. So it's even. It's actually a little countersunk on both sides right now. And the final step is then to take the beautification ring, or beauty ring, whichever you want to call it. Make sure you wipe out all that grease that's in there. Right, it's pretty much clean. It's a little bit stained, but then we're going to take it, line it up. What I'm probably going to do is look to see if there's any marks that I made, which I don't see any. Put that in the back just so you don't see it, and then push it on. This hammer has a little plastic piece on it. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a taps. Little taps. That's I guess to say a throwback to Bob Ross. Little trees, and give little taps. And just make sure it's seated all the way. And that's it. That's done. It's going to be, give it a good wipe down, good cleanup, and we're basically done, except for this pigtail in the back. And if you do see on here, there's a rounded part and a flat part. You want the rounded part goes in, so it's flat on the back. And then this door has like two little ears. It's going to sit right on that little notch right. Our little raised spot right there. And that's what's going to sit on. Alright, drop our screw in, and then we will be officially done. So just to recap, if you've watched all the way through here, you just need a couple flathead screwdrivers, a Phillips screwdriver, hammer, and a pin popper, pin pusher, whatever you want to call it. And that's it. Again, it's all done. It's just going to be cleaned up. And actually what we can do while we're here, let's plug her in. First of all, should make sure it was off, but I didn't. But just going to let it run for a little bit on low, make sure it gets all that grease throughout, and then we're done. Alright, if you really like this, I'm coming up with some other videos. This is only like my third video. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.